All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tarique. I'm the chair of the Department of Management in the Lubin School of Business. I'm also a professor of management and teach talent and human resource management. Today, I'm very pleased to welcome Eric Kump to the Dean's Roundtable. Eric has an amazing international background, and I'm also just eager to learn more about his experiences. Eric holds a BA in Finance and Accounting from Pace University and an MBA from Harvard Business School. He has over 25 years of international private equity experience across a variety of sectors. He is currently a partner at Alterra Capital Partners in London, UK. He was the former managing director and the head of the European private equity team of Dubai International Capital, I'm assuming in the United Arab Emirates. And prior to that, Eric was the managing director with Merrill Lynch Global, where he was a member of the Global Investment Committee. He specializes in research around private equity and emerging markets in Africa. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce Eric Kump. Eric?
Okay, thank you for the introduction. Welcome. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you all. I have very fond memories of my time at Pace University. So I guess maybe let me just give you a little bit of my background and my journey to Pace. So I grew up in Queens, New York. I went to Archbishop Malloy, so I was a Malloy boy. And for 3 years, I got on the M train every morning, came across the bridge to Pace. I chose Pace because I wanted to be close to Wall Street. Back in the day, I graduated in '92, so I guess I was a child of the '80s. And back then, if you still yuppies were all, everybody, it was the period of the yuppie. And I was, bought in to a career on Wall Street. So I knew I wanted to be near Wall Street. So it's kind of down to NYU or Pace. Frankly, couldn't afford Pace. Couldn't afford NYU at the time. And Pace was kind enough to give me a reasonably chunky scholarship. And so I chose Pace. As I said, I knew I wanted to go into business. So I decided I started out as a finance major, then decided that I should add accounting because Pace, as you know, is very good at accounting. And I thought that would be good to add accounting. A lot of my friends were also going, most of my close friends were accounting majors and were planning on taking the CPA. So I figured I'll just do both. And I think the other thing that was intriguing to me about Pace, again, I said, being near Wall Street was at the time, and I hope it's still the case, and I understand it to be the case, Pace had a very strong placement program for internships. So I worked all 4 years of Pace. It was almost like probably before your time. It was that guy, Michael J. Fox. There was that show, Family Ties, where he would, wear a suit and a briefcase, around the house. I would show up to Pace every day with my briefcase and my suit. And the first year I worked at Prudential-based Securities. The second year I worked at Lehman Brothers. And then for the third and fourth year, I worked at JP Morgan on 60 Wall Street at their global headquarters and had various internships. And that was, I believe, and I would work, I guess I was taking 20 hours of classes as a double major. And then I would work 15, 20 hours. Then I'd still find time to play basketball, work out, drink beer, and, socialize, let's put it that way. So it was a very full time at Pace. The last year at Pace, I was involved with the Accounting and Finance Club. And as a result, my friend and I were given a subsidized dorm room, and we lived on campus the last year. So that's kind of a little bit of, what led me to Pace and what attracted me to Pace, and, a little bit how I approached my kind of Pace career, so to speak.
Well, thank you. So I'll open the floor to questions now from the students, if they have any questions.
So just one clarification on my bio. I also spent between Dubai International Capital and Alterra. I was 10 years at the Carlyle Group in their European buyout fund, which was a $5 billion buyout fund. And the Carlyle Group is, one of the top 10 global private equity groups, and I was on their investment committee and a global partner. Just a quick addition.
So you have what we call the true global mindset.
Yeah, I guess a global nomad, I guess.
The global nomad, correct. So any questions?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself there. So we do have a couple. What is your favorite memory from your years at Pace?
I guess I still have 3 close friends from Pace. I think it was making those friends in freshman year. And I think one of my favorite ones is when I got in trouble and I almost got expelled. So Pace would have an annual ski trip, and that annual ski trip was run by the Pace Senate. And they decided one year to put the ski trip at a very poor time. And I realized that if I ran an alternative ski trip on a different weekend, a long weekend, versus running it midweek, I can get more demand. And then, so I organized my own ski trip. I made about $5,000, but I didn't follow the marketing rules. And I got, reprimanded, but I tried to explain to whoever was reprimanding me, that's a business school, and I made a business, a good business decision. And, the Pace Senate didn't have the demand that they normally would have. And therefore all the members of the Pace Senate weren't able to go on a free ski trip. And I thought that was kind of one of my, I guess, fond memories.
What was your most rewarding career move?
So look, I think one of the things that was really hard at the time was making the transition into investment banking. So if you go back to 1992, investment banking, I barely knew what investment banking was as I started approaching my junior and senior year. So I was working at JP Morgan. I was in their one of their fast track management programs, which was called Financial Management Plus. And that was for what I called the back office, to be, in their financial management and accounting division that would keep scores on what was happening in the bank. But I wanted to be in what I considered the front office, which was the commercial lending, commercial bank, investment banking. And even though I was there for over 2 years, I had almost a 4.0 GPA. I was, ranked number 1. I eventually won the award for finance student at Pace. They wouldn't even consider me for that position, because at the time it was very old school. You needed to go to, in their minds, an Ivy League school. So they offered me a position at the time. And this was back in '92. The Iraq War, first one, was going on, and it was a bad job environment. And I turned down that offer to roll the dice and look for a job in investment banking, because that's exactly what I wanted to do. Which, the benefit of hindsight was probably not a great call. And I remember with the green screens in Pace trying to find alums that were in investment banking, and there was almost nobody. So there were people that were at Morgan Stanley, at Goldman Sachs, at Merrill Lynch, but not in the investment banking program. But I, was stubbornly undeterred, kind of the, stubbornness of youth, I guess. And I just kept sending resumes, kept just stuffing envelopes, kept trying to talk to anybody I could. And then somebody at Merrill Lynch kind of recognized that JP Morgan program was a top program. And she invited me in for a first round interview. And at that time, you would have over 25 interviews before you receive a final offer, including what they called Super Saturday, Super Sunday. So that career move of getting into investment banking, and then I eventually, I did get an offer from Merrill Lynch for their investment banking program. And, that changed everything. And, I guess it was probably a big bet at the time, and probably a bit risky, but I got lucky, and that somebody recognized that internship and my achievements at Pace, and that was, I guess, a turning point in my career.
So were you always interested in international positions, or how did your international position come about?
Yeah, so both my parents were first generation. Well, they were actually German. They born and raised in Germany and came to the U.S. in the 50s in their kind of 20s after the war. So, around the dinner table, we always talked about international affairs. We always watched, and I actually almost went to Georgetown to study international relations. So I was torn between business and international relations. So, once I had in the investment banking programs, typically a 3-year program, then you're meant to go to business school. And your third year is you do 2 years in the group that hires you. And your third year, you kind of have an ability to go somewhere else in the firm. So I chose London immediately because I just wanted to get some more international experience. So I've always had it. And then when I started my private equity career, I actually started, as you said, in emerging markets, because I thought at the time it was, there were a lot of books and a lot of it was seen as a growth area. This was pre-internet. So emerging markets were all the rage. 80% of the world, 20% of the GDP, and people thought that would rebalance over time. So I've always been kind of drawn to emerging markets and drawn to international.
So right now, your majority of work is in Africa?
Yeah, for the last 4 years, when I was at Carlyle, the Africa Fund, which was a $700 million fund, was failing. It needed a leadership change, and they asked me to run the fund. So I replaced, I effectively replaced the other fund head and became fund head for that fund. And so, and I do that. And I also do a lot of personal investing. And now I'm actually teaching. For the last couple of years, I also teach a class at London Business School on private equity. I teach it in their MBA program, one semester a year.
Good. Wow. Excellent. Any more questions from students?
Yes, we actually do have a couple.
Okay.
For students that are interested in getting into your line of work, what skills and knowledge should they make sure they acquire? Any certifications they should think about getting?
So look, if you say private equity is notoriously hard to get into, and they very rarely hire straight out of uni. So to get into private equity, you usually have to go through investment banking first. So first step is to try to get into an investment banking program. And they typically hire people with accounting or finance degrees. And I would, again, emphasize that I think the differentiator is having relevant work experience. And a lot of these investment banks now are running internships between the junior and senior year. But the benefit of PACE is that you can work on Wall Street and go to PACE at the same time, whereas others, students in other parts of the country can't do that. So trying to get internships and work experience will be the differentiator, I believe, still. Certificates, not really. It's more experience, work experience, and good grades. Excellent grades, actually.
Speaking of grades, can you talk about the importance of transferable skills and how we should be thinking about what we're learning inside of the classroom?
Yeah, look, I think more so than ever, learning is moving from, knowledge is everywhere now. It's different than when, you can Google anything you want, obviously. And knowledge is less relevant. Now it's how you apply knowledge. And I think problem-solving skills, innovation, teamwork, personal maturity, communication skills are increasingly important. And I think that a lot of the entry-level jobs are now much more computer assisted. So if you think about my first year in investment banking, we would get 10Ks and 10Qs of public companies and sit there typing in the numbers and creating analysis from spreadsheets. Now the analysts in my team just type in the ticker symbol and 20 pages of analysis pops it right out, right? Literally in the format that, would have taken us a week to produce, right? So now it's about taking that data and interpreting it and making insights and seeing relationships among the data. So I think things are moving from, again, from knowledge is more accessible. You don't get paid for being a workhorse now. You get paid for deriving insights, problem solving, teamwork, communication. And
Any more questions?
Yes. So speaking of communication, everyone always talks about the importance of networking. Any tips on making connections and growing our network in this new normal?
Yeah, networking is very important in your career. Early in your career, finding a mentor is incredibly important. So early, I can point to 3 or 4 individuals in the early part of my career that were my mentors that made a huge difference in my trajectory and shaping me. So and networking is great. I mean, I was even telling my son the other day, the old adage of, sometimes it's who you know, not what you know, does apply, right? So I think, I always have this thing, if you don't ask, you don't get, right? So don't be shy, reach out to people, and ask for help and see what happens. My other career advice generally is don't use a rifle, use a shotgun, right? Because a lot of people sit there and they spend too much time trying to think about the perfect way of doing something. And I think this is just trial and error. Use a shotgun. It's still a numbers game at the end of the day. So I think sometimes, more shots on goal, higher chance of success. Right?
In all the roles you've been in, which was the most challenging and why, and which one was the most fulfilling?
Oh, they were all challenging. They've all been challenging for different reasons. I guess, look, I think probably the most challenging was when I joined. After 15 years at Merrill Lynch, I decided to leave because this was between Bear Stearns and Lehman, and I actually didn't think Merrill was in great financial condition. And my boss at the time disagreed with me, and I told him he should sell all his shares because I don't think Merrill will make it, and it didn't. So, and then I got this offer to go to DIC. It seemed a little bit kind of sexy at the time. Dubai in the Middle East had a lot of money. They wanted me to head Europe for their new private equity effort. I joined, and within 1 month, Lehman happened. And they had acquired 6 companies through leverage buyouts, and they were all 6 multi-billion-dollar companies worth more than $1 billion, and each of them had between 500 million and $1 billion of debt. And then the great financial crisis happened, and it was literally the financial equivalent of triage, right? All these companies were in financial distress, and all of them needed to take drastic actions on preserving cash, cutting costs, and renegotiating with banks to avoid bankruptcy. And so it was, and nobody knew what was the financial system going to make it, right? So we would, and there were no rules for that kind of Six Sigma financial shock, and it was rewarding at the same time. It was kind of, I called it speed private equity, right? And I learned probably more in those 18 months than I did in 10 years before that.
PACE students have a grit and determination like I have not seen anywhere else. Did you feel the same when you were here? How did that serve you well in your career?
Yeah, it was, grit is a great word. I call it grinding. I mean, like I said, the story is that I wouldn't take no for an answer. I mean, I was blind about wanting to get into investment banking, and I just wouldn't, people kept advising me that I should I should just put my head down, join the JP Morgan fast track management program, and then try to make a lateral move in 3 to 4 years. And I was having none of it. And I just kept, I kept applying for investment banking. And then once I got into, I had a big chip on my shoulder. Once I got into the investment banking program, I was, surrounded by all the Ivy League kids that, were they were told that, that they were better, or that's what they only hired from. So I made it my job to beat them all, so to speak. And, and I was the highest ranked analyst in my class for 3 years in a row. And I think that PACE students do have grit. And I actually think it is something that you need to have come across in your, it's one of my key hiring criteria. I call it fire in the belly, because I like to hire people that I think have that, because, jobs are hard, right? And you want people who have that fire in the belly, that determination to win, to finish the job, to go the extra mile. So I literally, maybe it's, again, you're a prisoner of your past, selection bias. So I like to hire what I call, sorry, not to be sexist, boys made good, right? A boy made good, right? As they call it in the UK. So I think that if you have that grit, you should try to give examples of that in your interview process. I think a lot of employers like to hire people like that.
In a time where there is a lot of discussion around leadership, what does good leadership look like? And can you share with us what you deem as a good leader?
What does a good leader look like? I think my simple way of leading has always been lead by example, right? So, I work hard. I expect everybody on my team to work hard. I think being a good leader is about empowering people. So, I think one of the phrases I heard with the CEO, you should only do what others can't, right? So as a leader, you should focus on the things that others can't and do those, and then empower the team that what others can do, let them do it, and let them make mistakes, and let them know it's okay to make mistakes. But not trying is not acceptable. But it's effort, and failure is the consequence of effort. So you have to when there is that failure of a team member, you have to pick them up and reinforce that value. So I think leadership is about being genuine. In my mind, it's just being about genuine and fair.
Is there a mistake you feel you have made during your career path? How do you rebound from that? And what did you learn?
Yes, I think, I don't know, maybe I probably stuck at Merrill Lynch too long when I was there for 15 years. So, because once I left, it led me in different directions. But I think there was also merit in not jumping too much early in my career. And Merrill was a place that kept investing in me and building. So I wouldn't necessarily say it was a mistake, but I think I probably wasn't, I think the mistake I made was I wasn't ever in the market. I think you also have to cultivate, relationship with headhunters and be more open to opportunities. And I wasn't. I was almost blindly loyal, and I would just hang up the phone when headhunters called, because I was so grateful that Merrill took a chance on me that I was overly loyal, I think. And I don't know if it was a mistake. It kind of ended up in Carlisle, which was great, but not by design, but by luck, right? And I think I never really plotted my career. I just kind of was more of a little bit of a, more like Tom Hanks, that movie, just kind of random walk.
So do you feel like that's something that you would say to a younger version of yourself? Plan a little?
Yeah, I think I would. I think career planning is important. And yeah, I would. And I think one of the ways you do that is you think and talk about your career, and meeting with headhunters. They do that for a living. Like they they'll show you opportunities. They'll get you to think about what you're good at, what really makes you happy, so on and so forth.
So apart from planning, do you have any suggestions for students in today's climate?
Look, today's climate is tough. One step back. I have two generic things that I always say to people career-wise. Try to really find something you like or love, because if you love it, you'll be good at it, and you will be more successful and either financially or at least psychologically. And I know it sounds obvious, but I see a lot of people, particularly in investment banking, because it was such a sought after career, that did it for the money because it paid a lot, right? And still does. And I think they sold their souls. And, people used to say to me, like some of my bosses used to say, I'm not even sure why they paid me, because they knew I would do the job for free because I just loved it, right? And so, if you can find that, that's, I think, the be all and end all, because then work is not a 4-letter word. It's a different 4-letter word. It's love, not work. And the second thing is, try to be the money maker. And I know that's not, so what I mean by that, if you really want to be an accountant, go to the Big Four. Then you are the revenue producer, right? If you're in insurance, go be an underwriter or a salesperson. If you're finance, try to be an IBK, the front office, because that's where the action is, right? And I actually think that is a good way of thinking about things from a business perspective. You want to be in the front, the tip of the spear, if you can. So then I think, look, now, who knows? I mean, there are some growth sectors, right? Renewables will be a huge growth sector. Carlyle's investing tons of money. There's going to be a generational shift in the whole energy paradigm. Healthcare has changed forever. So there are some growth sectors. And then, there's some exciting, so there are some growth sectors, but I think the other good thing is that I came out in a recession. What I didn't realize was there's a lot of room ahead of you, because they fire a lot of people get fired right now. And then if you come in, and you might be coming in at the beginning of the next wave of growth with less people in front of you, because a lot of those people got fired. So it's an exciting time to be coming in. Even it's kind of counterintuitive. It'll be hard in the beginning to get a job, but once you have a job, you might have the wind at your back.
So you did mention mentoring a little earlier. Did you have a mentor? If so, for how long? And what did you get from that experience?
Yeah, so when I first got to Merrill Lynch, the head of the M&A department he was from Brooklyn. So he kind of just took a liking to me because I was from Queens. And when he was put in charge of Europe M&A, mergers and acquisitions, he asked me to come with him. And that's when I moved to the UK for my 3rd year. So he just took a liking to me, and he put me on the best assignments, and, would just make sure I had the exposure. And then he would come by and tell me what he thought was important in terms of, my career progression. Then when I moved to private equity in Merrill Lynch, there was a VP at the time, George Pitaro, who I'm still in touch with to this day. And he was my boss, I guess, for almost 7-8 years. And he was just really tough boss, right? Tough but fair. And just learned a lot for him. He was like he was Lebanese, the best negotiator I've ever come across. So I learned a lot of negotiating skills from him. So I think actually the thing I missed then, after that I became so senior, I didn't have a mentor, right? And I realized that's why this whole explosion of executive coaching has become like a big industry now. It's lonely at the top, and people still need it. And so now, and they were afraid to ask because it used to be seen as a sign of weakness. Now almost every CEO in America has an executive coach, which is a mentor. So I think that's a sign of how important it is that there's a whole industry that's exploded now, because now it's you can admit that you need help. Right?
All right. So I have a follow-up question. So you talk about coaching and mentoring. If you had to go back again, what advice can you give our students on how to find those mentors or coaches that can guide them throughout their careers? Because it's more complicated today. You have more people out there. You have social media. It's difficult to filter out. Everybody looks qualified on paper, but selecting a coach or selecting a mentor is also a skill. So what advice would you give our students?
Look, I think, I guess you know, if there's somebody that's 10 years older that takes an active interest in you and your career, embrace it, right? And try to find ways to cultivate it, I guess, right? So, you know, if you know, and see if, you know, and people, it's ego, you know. So if you say to somebody, I need advice, that's very ego, you know, that just say, I need advice, can you give me advice? You know, a lot of times that's, you know, very ego gratifying for the person you're asking, right? And, you know, if you don't ask, you don't get, right? So usually you find each other, like, you know, in these two instances, they happen to be bosses of mine, right? So, and I happen to do, I think, a reasonably good job, and they took an interest in me. So I reciprocated, and I guess I asked, you know, them lots of questions about, you know, and I took an interest in their life and their career, and then it became a virtuous circle, I guess. I don't know. It was kind of organic. I never went out and said, I'm going to go, you know, Tuesday to-do list, go find a mentor, right?
Very interesting. That's great advice. So now, do you think because of this COVID, do you think we'll ever get back to the time we had, or it'll be a new norm? And if it's going to be a new norm, what do you see?
No, I think it's going to go back to normal. I kind of do. I mean, I think, no, it will. Maybe a little bit less business travel, but I think that's even, or working from home, I think that's even, I'm not convinced that that will be the case. I do think people like to be, we're social animals, right? And we do, and I think that to collaborate, you need to be together. The more creative the industry, the more relevant it is. And then there'll be FOMO. People will think that, and it will be true, if half the team's in the office and half is at home, the people at home will be missing out from the mentorship, the decision-making will be made in the hallways, at the water cooler, the proverbial water cooler. And those people will get their better career prospects and so on and so forth. So I think those things will slowly, there'll be a slow gravitational pull back to, you know, the way things were, which was, you know, go to the office and, you know, get on a plane and, you know, to see people. I think that should go, I hope it goes back. I mean, I hate, you know, I hate this version of it, right? And I think a lot of people do. And we were in our second lockdown now, and people are, you know, like the sequel is always worse than the original. And, you know, it's kind of, people are on suicide watch over here now.
Yeah, that's, but so what do you tell companies like Microsoft and Google who've made some positions permanent, working from home?
I was shocked. I mean, I was shocked at how early they made those calls. And look, I think they're going to suffer. And if they really stick to that, I think that, you know, those are still businesses that need to innovate, right, to survive. And I think that their productivity and rate of innovation will fall. And I think that they'll knee jerk and tell people to come back. I don't know. I just think that I guess enough people like it, but I think the productivity is just not there. I think it's to think you're as productive at home. I'm not, right? I'm wearing sweatpants right now with a business shirt on top. I mean, it's just silly, right?
When you hire, I know you look for ambition and motivation, like the fire in the belly, but what other skills, other than the technical skills, which they need, what other skills or abilities do you look for in a candidate when you're hiring?
You know, the funny thing is that the more I hire, the less I look for technical skills. Yeah. Because you're looking for teachability almost, right? So actually you start to realize you need to start with raw intelligence, right? Because you need somebody who's smart. You need somebody who has EQ, all right, emotional intelligence. You need somebody who could be a good team member, someone who you actually want to spend time with. That whole, you know, do I want to go on a business trip, you know, sit next to them on an airplane? So because you realize that most of what most of it's going to be, you're going to train the people, right? You know, that's why in investment banking, I used to joke, I realized that they would hire people from the Ivy Leagues and had never worked a day in their life in an office, and never had a business class in their entire life. They were just hiring people that were, you know, top 1-2% intellect with good character. And all these grades were a demonstration that they were smart and ambitious, right? And they just took this raw talent and then they just infused it with, you know, on-the-job training, right? So I think more and more, I just look for people that have the potential to learn quickly. and the passion to want to learn and work hard, almost, right? So, and then the technical stuff's all kind of like just, what you decide to spend time on in uni.
I think that's great advice. So just to paraphrase, so you're looking for people who are coachable,
Yeah.
and who can learn. I think that's great advice. Do you have any other questions from students?
I actually have a question. How you doing? My name is Matthew Martinez. I'm actually a student from the Pleasantville campus. I'm a senior. And my question is so I know you talked about how you wanted to get in investment banking and like that's where your experience was before you graduated and you're looking for those roles after. But how did you move from the investment banking world to the private equity world? How did that transition come about? Were you presented with an opportunity or were you actually looking for that since you graduated?
Yeah, so what happened was I realized that what we call it the buy side were actually, the people making the decisions, right? So kind of I always try to make it like, it's like buying and selling houses. So
Yeah.
investment bankers are like the real estate agents or the mortgage brokers, but the people who buy and sell the houses are the private equity. So I actually quit Merrill Lynch and, I went to my mentor and said, I realized that, I worked for private equity. I said, I want to quit and go back to New York and find a private equity job. So I quit Merrill Lynch. He was kind enough to say, okay, while you're moving back, why don't you help teach the incoming class as a teacher, and that way I can get you an apartment and you can stay on the payroll. I said thank you. And then all of a sudden Merrill was starting this private equity emerging market group, so it was very by chance, but I was just determined I was just going to quit and go back to New York and send my resume and bet on black again. Which at the time was probably another dumb move, because I should have, you shouldn't quit. You should always, best way to have it to get a job is with an existing job. So that was kind of a little bit, dumb the way I did it, but I got lucky and Merrill was starting a group just as I was looking for that opportunity.
And so that niche in emerging markets and now in Africa, that kind of that came to you. It wasn't something that you're looking for.
No, that kind of, again, there was the head of Carlyle, Bill Conway, one of the three co-founders, said, asked me if I could do a favor for him and help out by kind of this area was, failing and embarrassing, and can I turn it around? Which I said, okay, because he's the boss, right? And he was kind of a mentor at the time, even though he was the boss. So yeah, so and I just thought, look, I did deals on, 4 other continents, and I kind of thought that I'm a contrarian. I thought that it could be, an interesting time to be involved in Africa. It turns out it's pretty damn hard to make money.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Why do you say it's hard to make money in Africa? Could you just elaborate more?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I think the first thing is you need stable macro if you want to be, an investor of any type, private or public. And the macro volatility is significant in Africa, and more so than anywhere else I've been. So, and a lot of that is, they don't really have well-developed institutions, political or financial. So therefore they can't mitigate some of the business cycle shocks. They're not well managed. The countries are not well managed from a political point of view, and they're not well managed from a financial point of view. So there's a lot of macro volatility, and then then talent. It's not as easy to find. If you want to replace a CEO, it's not as easy as replacing a CEO in the U.S. So private equity, one of the skill sets we have, or one of the levers we have, if a business isn't performing, we change the management team. But firing people is easy. Then you have to go find and hire somebody. So that's so there's less, and then there's less leverage because we rely on leverage to produce returns as well. So you can't borrow as much debt because of the volatility. Then there's a lot of FX. But there's growth. But on the positive side is there's usually a market leader in Africa grows faster, has higher market share and higher margins because it has, if the companies that do prosper dominate, right? So if you can pick if you can pick the winners, then that you can make money by backing those winners. But you have to, it's a more narrow market. So there's a lot of challenges.
Yeah, do we have more
You're going
questions?
to hear the printer in the background. Apologies. But what is your favorite country to travel to and why?
One of them was I spent a lot of time in Istanbul in Turkey, and I think Turkey's it's a very cosmopolitan city, and it is the proverbial where East meets West, right? It's you can go over the Bosphorus Strait on a bridge and you drive literally from Europe to Asia, and it has exactly that feel. It was at the time very secular from a religious, and it's very secular. So it was a secular government. So it just had it had an exotic feel. I made 2 very successful investments there. One of my investments, I invested in a company. It's called BIM, BIM. It was, we invested when it was 100 million. I put in 30 million. We made 5 times our money. So we made 150 million. And we IPO'd it, which was unique, at 500 million. It's worth $6 billion today. And it's one of the most successful retail companies in the world. And, I was involved when it was only worth 100. And I spent probably almost half my time for 2 years in Istanbul. So I really I'm actually desperate to get back. I haven't been there for years. So I would say Istanbul is my favorite city.
So you're currently where you are right now. It's a pretty competitive position. How do you stay current and informed, and how do you develop yourself?
Yeah, I don't know is the answer. I guess I'm still an avid reader, right? And so I stay current. So every time I work out, I listen to Bloomberg News. I think you have to stay current. And then I read The Economist still, reasonably religiously. And then you have to be intellectually curious. I mean, I think when you come across something, you follow up on it, right? So now I think one of the things I think is really interesting is biases, right? This whole the book, Think Fast and Slow, The Undoing Project, all these things that people, I think self-reflection on your biases, because it's all about decision-making when you get more senior, right? All you're doing is making decisions. And then understanding how biases play into your decision-making is important, which means understanding yourself, right? And your strengths and weaknesses, and understanding other people's biases, because everybody has a bias and different type, and there's many forms of biases. So I think you have to stay curious and current, I guess. That's yeah. But I don't read books as much as I used to. I used to be better at reading books. I don't read books. I just read current stuff and listen to a lot of podcasts as well, like Freakonomics, things like that.
Podcasts might be the new books.
Yeah.
How would you identify high potential employees?
Look, again, I think it's, usually, again, I think it's someone who makes an extra effort or goes the extra yard. So a lot of times, if I give a task to someone and they just do the task, but then they don't think about the what next, okay, I've asked them to do this analysis. And if they just kind of do it blindly and hand it to me, and then I sit there and interpret it and then draw inferences or insights to make a conclusion, what I think, I used to think about it when it was early in my career, that the ticket to the game was I needed to do that analysis correctly. Once I did that, I would sit there and say, now before I hand it to my boss, what is my boss going to do when they look at the data? What are they going to think and do? And then if I realize that they're probably going to ask me to do something, the next thing, and if I can actually do that next thing now and walk in with the thing they asked, and then let that person read and go, you know what, actually, now I'd like you to do this. And I said, well, actually, I already did it. Or here's well, almost what you asked for. That wow factor, that does, floors people. Or you're more prepared for a conversation, or you're more prepared to say, I did this, and I think you may find this interesting. Can I just point this out to you? Then it's no longer, you're not doing a job. You're doing you're you're not doing the task just because you were asked to do it. You're doing it because you care and you want to learn, and just that, I think, differentiates. It might sound like a little bit of a party trick, but people who do that, I mean, I did it naturally, not because I thought it was a good technique. I just wanted to know, I wanted to be my boss immediately, right? I just wanted his job or her job.
What do you love about your role today? And if you can change one thing about it, what would it be?
Look, I think what I always love about my role in general, private equity, there's no 2 days that are the same, right? So that's the thing. It's huge variety because you're either, you spend part of your time trying to buy companies, part of your time managing the companies that you already own, and then trying to sell some of them. And there's always a problem. They're like children, right? There's always one of them misbehaving, and there's always a crisis, and the crises could be, I mean, I've seen it all, right? So I really like that. Sometimes I think what I don't like is that sometimes it's not a mute button, right? Because since they're living, breathing organisms, and I usually now only get brought the tough decisions. Sometimes, even though I'm pretty good at working continuously, I just wish there'd be a mute button. And sometimes I actually enforce radio silence over the holidays. And I tell people, literally, unless a factory burns down or something really bad happens, let's just have, let's have radio, let's just stop the noise for a week or two over Christmas and just try to relax. So I do think it's important to power down as well. And I think that, but life just as, life today just doesn't seem to allow that, because these things, we have instant communication, and people have, kind of communication diarrhea too much sometimes, right? Sorry.
Final question. What was the path that led you to PACE and to your major here?
Well, look, again, I wanted to study business. I wanted to, I needed to stay local for financial reasons. I couldn't afford to board. So it's kind of NYU at PACE. NYU is still out of our price range, so PACE. And then I was determined to work on Wall Street, and Wall Street was 4 blocks away from Emory. And then, I started on finance, and then I decided to do ad accounting because, I thought it'd be hardcore to be a double major, and I wanted to differentiate myself. So I decided to double major and take more credits to try to differentiate myself and be, I guess, hardcore. And I even took the CPA exam just because I had friends that, were finance students. And even though I had an offer from investment banking, I just did it to show I could, right? So I took all 4 parts of the CPA exam just for and giggles, right? As they say in the UK. Yeah, so I don't know. I guess that's what led me to PACE and led me to double major in finance and accounting, because I wanted to work on Wall Street. And like my son now, who likes science, he keeps saying to me, "Daddy, you were very lucky. You just knew what you wanted to do early on." And I guess the answer is yes, I was lucky. I didn't really, I was lucky. I kind of knew early on what I wanted to do, and I think I got it right. And, he's struggling because he's not sure what he wants to do. He likes science, but he doesn't know what does that mean, what kind of career. And, so I appreciate that it's not everybody can just, point and shoot and stick with it, because it's not that simple for a lot of people. I'm just a very simple person.
I saw that you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you got your next level of education. You have an MBA, right?
Okay.
So obviously things are rough with everything going on now with the job market. And you said, obviously, when it starts back up, it's going to give us an opportunity. But if, I or someone else can't find a position during the time, do you think it's a good opportunity to get that next level of education and use that to applying when things start getting back together? Or do you think, because the other route is some people recommend that you go to a firm and see if you can have that firm, provide you with that next level of education, sometimes paying for your studies and things like that?
Yeah. So look at Harvard Business School used to, it's a requirement to have 3 to 4 years of work experience. And I think that, I think that's right. Basically, I think that having your MBA is much richer with work experience, much, much richer. And it's a nice break. It's a nice way to kind of reassess your career, and pivot. So if you just go from academia to academia, you miss out hugely. I wouldn't recommend it. In this, with COVID, I think it's not, I don't know. I actually think if you're coming out in June, you're fine, right? I mean, I think in June, I came out in a recession. I didn't even, it was a pretty bad recession, 92. But I think you're fine coming out, and I think you're better off working than not working. I mean, a master's in computer science, something like that, that's a add-on, because then you want to be like some sort of quant trader. That could make sense, right? So if you're, if you want to get in, computer science, but I wouldn't go and get an MBA, even if they would let you in, because you need the work experience. If that makes sense.
No, yeah, it does. I've seen that on websites asking for the work experience and such, but thank you.
You're welcome. Look, I actually think it's going to be fine. I think come June, people will be hiring again. And they're going to hire young, and they're going to fire mid, and they're going to hire young. I mean, that's, so what you don't want to be is a 40-year-old, 40-year-old right now, a middle manager. Those are the ones with the big bullseyes, man.
Well, it makes me grateful to be 62. That's great. Thank you, Eric.
Not that we age discriminate in private equity.
Great. Oh, phew. Tarique, any closing comments?
No, I think this has been wonderful. I hope the students took, there's great points, learning points. What I see here, when we do a lot of these, I see, and I think Eric is right, extremely lucky to figure out what the passion is. And this is a great example of where if you find your passion early on in your career, that, your work disappears and it becomes your life. So, so I think, Eric, I think that's where you are, and a great example. And even if you're not able to find that early on, it's still good to keep looking for that passion, because I think, Eric, you're an example of what happens when you do work that you love. Yeah. And I think one other takeaway, which I'll emphasize, is that you need to be coachable at every stage. Professionals like Eric, they can literally hire anyone they want, but technical skills are out there. And I think Eric made a great point. You need to be willing to learn and listen and change. And the third thing I observed from Eric is the relationships that you form with people who then, all the opportunities came from people you knew who were also your mentors. So that also emphasized the importance of building good relationships, especially having mentors early on in your careers. The only point I would slightly disagree with Eric is stay in touch with your professors and send them thank you notes, and you become rich and famous, donate to their charities. But I think this was great. I learned a lot, and I hope you did. Eric, thank you so much for your time.
Hey, one closing thing, by the way.
Sure.
If you want, everybody, I'll tell you something this week. If you want to just get inspired, this guy, I don't know if you, I like to do triathlons, and I did this is my Ironman bottle. So I did an Ironman. This week, I don't know if people saw it, but the first person with Down syndrome did a complete Ironman. His name is Chris Nika, and on his website, one of the most inspirational speeches from this young man. And he said, basically, the key is work hard, two rules. One, work hard. Second, get 1% better every day. That's his rules. And this guy went from not being able to swim to 3 years ago to doing a full Ironman. So if you're feeling a little bit down and you think that things are hard or impossible, watch this guy's video.
Great, that's great. Thank you so much.
I get choked up just even this guy is amazing. You should definitely see it.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Cheers.
Thank you.